Topics of today are frequently in the agenda of medical affairs people, especially if you work in oncology or in severe infections that are the two areas where most cases of compassionate use is happening. You will certainly face one day or another the request from some clinicians to have your drug before it is approved for the marketing sales. The compassionate use, so-called, is becoming very frequently because we are developing, pharma companies and biotech companies are developing very innovative drugs that for some patients are really life-saving. So we will cover this topic to give you also some real-life experience from the first speaker, Dr. Xavier Luria. The second topic is about market access. We know that market access can be a very time-consuming exercise, especially in some areas of the world, especially in low and middle income countries, where there is not the staff of experts able to make all the necessary evaluations. And unfortunately, in some time in this country, they do not accept the work done in major countries, but they want to start everything from scratch. And this can cause years of delay in areas where, once again, some drugs are really life-saving. In this case, we will have the experience of Professor Samserek that recently was involved in a experience in a test with South Africa to speed up the market access of some drugs. So welcome to the webinar, to this conversation of the Academy. I'm really pleased to see that many of you have accepted our proposal and are joining today. So I will introduce briefly the first speaker. Xavier Luria is a medical doctor. He is currently an independent consultant on drugs and medical devices. He was head of safety and efficacy at the European Medicine Agency in the period from 2005 until 2012. So he has 7-year experience at one of the major regulatory agencies and previously held a leadership position in the biopharmaceutical industry for more than 18 years, covering clinical development, pharmacovigilance, statistics, and medical affairs. So, Xavier, thank you for joining us, and we are keen to listen to your suggestions.
Thank you very much, Domenico, for your kind introduction and also for organizing very well these conversations. And to all, I have to apologize first because I'm with a flu, therefore perhaps occasionally I may have still some cough. So sorry about that. The topic is extremely interesting, and I will get focused on the European area where my colleague Sam Salek will later on complement that with the other views. Basically, excuse me because I'm moving. Basically, in Europe we have a number of I would say 3 main schemes, and later on I will complement these with some others. There are 3 particularities to go rapidly to the development and or authorization, which are the accelerate assessment. And please don't confuse that with the FDA accelerate approval, which is a different, same acronym, AA, but many things different between the two. Second, the conditional marketing authorization, and the third, exceptional circumstances. Also, we have to add and the component of the compassionate use, which is regulated by the national member states. And before going ahead, I would like to emphasize one topic, which is very important so far, and apparently is going to be even more important with the future European legislation on drugs. And it refers to the unmet medical need. The concept of an unmet medical need is the bottom line for all these potential ways of getting medicines early to the market. The unmet medical need, here is the proper definition. I will not bore you with this, but basically in plain language says that there is an unmet medical need from a regulatory point of view. I must say that not always is the same from a regulatory point of view than from a clinical point of view. From a regulatory point of view, it refers that no other product is approved for the indication of the new product, and also assuming that this new product will provide measured therapeutic advantage. That's an important concept because it'll focus the attention of the regulators in this area. I would say is a relatively huge area where we have nothing to offer to the patients. And here is where we have to pay attention rather sometimes than repeating and providing additional treatments with similar mechanisms of action. Therefore, we are here trying to fill the gap of unmet medical needs. And I wanted to add this additional slide. It's not for you to add any particular concept, but it refers to what is the European Commission thinking with regard to the new pharmaceutical strategy for Europe. This is a very important process. I encourage you to follow and to monitor the news on that, because the European Commission is committed to trigger new regulations over the next period of time. I cannot tell you exactly when, because all the deadlines are usually fail, but they are progressing on producing a number of interesting documents. Why I'm mentioning that is because within the new pharmaceutical strategy for Europe, there is a priority to the unmet medical need. Therefore, for the future, this concept will continue being substantial on the European regulations. Regarding the expedited development, additionally, there are a couple of two different approaches. One is the adaptive pathways and another prime. I must say that adaptive pathway, and I was present at the time of the creation of that with different names. At that time was, I think, adaptive license and something like that. Honestly, the EMEA carried out a pilot program, and after that, and a couple of and a workshop and a couple of documents, I have not seen any further activity on this matter. I know that the agency has made progress on discussing and providing advice to the sponsors together with the HTA bodies, health technology assessment bodies. So those in charge of pricing and reimbursement. And this is a consequence of the adaptive pathway. But as such, the scheme is not longer in use today. While the prime, the priority medicines, is very important, and it tries to focus on expediting and optimizing the development of new medicines. And these medicines, so-called priority medicines, should address unmet medical needs as well. Excuse me. Yeah. Sorry, because there are some slides here. Is the accelerated assessment, that was the first that I mentioned, is what's the intention of the accelerated assessment is that the procedure that usually, centralized procedure, usually takes 210 days without clock stop periods, will last for 150 days only. So this is a significant reduction, And this is again granted to products that not only are addressing an unmet medical need, which is important, but also that the product constitute a major public health interest. And the third is an intangible thing, but very important, that the dossier submitted by the company to the agency for approval, for evaluation, looks like in good condition to be triggered by a shorter period of time. So several times the companies submit very interesting product with attractive mechanism of action, good indication, etc. But the agency look at, for example, the quality development with a number of important deficiencies. Under this situation, it is unlikely that the company will be able to fulfill the 150 days, even with some clock stops. Therefore, it is important to consider that the quality of the dossier submitted also makes a difference on the acceptance of the accelerated assessment. The next one, very important, that one, conditional marketing authorization. Among other things, because all the company, when they go wrong in the marketing authorization procedure, in a point of time, they always suggest, and why not a conditional, because I can save part of my dossier. So the conditional marketing authorization is not created to save products from the wrong way in the assessment during a standard marketing authorization application. The intention is that the product should aim at treating seriously debilitating or life-threatening diseases, or intended for use in emergency situations. Please, you all may remember the time of the pandemic. This has been the king of the marketing authorization procedures used by the EMEA to approve many of the vaccines, and also or designated as an orphan drug. And with these three or criteria, or between the three, there are additional requirements that all of them should be fulfilled. And they are a positive benefit risk balance of the product. So you cannot approve even conditionally a product that is not positive on the benefit risk balance. Second, that is likely that the applicant will be able to provide comprehensive data, because the conditional is granted for 1 year, and this should be renewed annually. Therefore, it is expected that the applicant will be able to provide additional data. Third, that there is an unmet medical need, again, the concept of the unmet medical need. And fourth, that the benefit to the public health of the medicinal product immediate availability will overweigh the risk of due to the need of further data. Therefore, that all the four criteria allow to a potential conditional marketing authorization. Here is the one that I showed before regarding adaptive pathways and PRIME. And then the compassionate use, I think, is important to mention that point, because also many companies use sometimes the compassionate use as a way to start the marketing of a product. And also, I would say that this is from a regulatory standpoint, this is not the intention. The compassionate use is that under strict conditions, products that are under development could be available for particular patients or group of patients where there is no treatment for the disease. But the medicine in the European context must be undergoing clinical trials, one, or have entered the marketing authorization application. Therefore, you need that the product is under registration or under clinical trials. The EMEA provides recommendations through the CHMP, and there is a guideline, particularly it is mentioned here on the bottom of the slide, a guideline to provide scientific recommendations upon request of whom? Request from the member states. But these do not create any legal framework. It's just scientific recommendation, because the final decisions is up to each member state. Therefore, the rules for compassionate use are entirely managed by the member states, and the participation of the CHMP from the agency, the Committee for Human Medicinal Products, is only upon request and is based on scientific recommendations. This is a summary of 2023, all the main figures of the European Medicines Agency recommendation for new medicines. Look at that. Last year, we got 77 positive opinions, 3 negative, and 19 withdrawn applications. Remember that many withdrawn are led for a negative let's say, a negative trend on the CHMP. And only, in this case, only 3 were completely 3 negative opinions, but many of these 19, if not all, should also be considered as a negative trend within the discussion of the CHMP. The important for the today discussion is that the last year, 3 of the authorized products were under a PRIME program, and also that, although 3 were accelerated assessment, 8 were conditional marketing authorizations, and 1 was an exceptional circumstances. These exceptional circumstances I did not mention before because there was only 1 case. There are more cases over years. It's a relatively old procedure within the agency, and it refers when a product has no way to get additional data, particularly clinical data, and therefore the existing data seems interesting, seems sufficient to grant an authorization under very, very specific conditions and circumstances. So it's a very exceptional case, but I wanted at the very end to mention that. And then thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to bring this back to Domenico and or Sam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier, for this very comprehensive analysis of different ways in which the European agency can speed up the regulatory process. These are very useful to be taken into consideration by all sponsors, because in many cases, your drug may well fit into one of these categories. I forgot to say that if you have any question, you can write your question in the chat room and I will read them. Or you can have time at the end of the 2 presentations to raise any question or request of clarification. If there is in this moment no question, I don't see any request or... Yes, Sam, you have one. Thank you for
yes. Thank you very much indeed. Xavier, thank you so much. That was such a exciting and stimulating talk. One thing I wanted to ask you, which I have never been sure whether that's part of the CMA, in the post-authorization submission that the agency is expecting from the applicant, are they also insisting, does the EMA also insist on real-world data?
Yeah, but I must say that this is a relatively recent trend from the agency. So the conditional marketing authorization exists for a while, since 2006, that entered into force, so many years. And I must say that at the beginning, the real world data was not considered appropriate for the follow-up of a conditional. However, in recent years, I would say last 5 years, perhaps, something like that, no more, the real world data enter, let's say, in this scenario. And yes, it is playing an important role in some of the conditional marketing authorizations.
Thank you very much indeed. So if I say that to some of the people that do come to me to ask questions, then I'm not actually giving them, a wrong information. The second thing I wanted to ask, if I may, in terms of the compassionate use, does the EMA has the authority of approving it, or it depends on the law and the regulation of the individual countries?
It depends on the individual countries. The EMA and the European Commission have no remit on this topic except providing the scientific advice if requested. And I must say even that in the past when I was there, I was particularly pushing for a couple of cases where I considered, but this was my personal view, but let's say supported by the agency, that this was a case for an appropriate compassionate use. And for whatever reasons, company, national state, whatever, this never fly. So we have not, I'm not speaking now, I'm not at the EMA, so, but
Yes.
the EMA has not the power, the legal, nothing to force any compassionate use.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. That's great.
Okay, thank you very much for this additional explanation. For the time being, there is no question. So let's move to the second speaker. We have Professor Sam Selek, that is Professor of Pharmacoepidemiology in the School of Life and Medical Sciences at the University of Hertfordshire in the UK, where he leads the Public Health and Patient Safety Research Group. He is also the director of the Institute of Medicine Development at Cardiff in the UK, the visiting professor at the State of Hessen in Germany, and vice president of the PharmaTrain Federation. He is also the co-founder and the past chair of the Patient Engagement Special Interest Group of the International Society of Quality of Research, and co-chairs the European Hematology Association Scientific Working Group for Quality of Life and Symptoms. So, thank you very much, Sam, for being with us today, and we are very interested to listen your personal experience in supporting one African country in speeding up the market access of new drugs. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Domenico, for a very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to hopefully have a good conversation with the attendees today. If I can find trying to flash up my slides. Okay, right. Now, where can I see? Sorry, for some reason, I can't use the share of the. Okay, share screen.
Sam, if you want, you can send to me the presentation. I will share this in the screen. Okay.
Oh, here is coming.
Perfect.
Can you see it now?
We-
Okay, lovely.
We see it.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about something that is very close to my heart and I'm quite passionate about, and the issue of the access to medicine in terms of the difficulties and problems, in particular access of medicines in low and middle income countries, and the gap that has always been between the major regulatory authorities and the developed countries having access to new medicines, and the difference in a number of years before patients in other parts of the world get access, and I said in particular in the low and middle income countries. A lot of studies and papers have been published about this, looking at the gap analysis between the first market and the second market, and etc., etc. Now, the problems, in particular with the low and middle income countries, are multifactorial. They could be either in the lowest situation, if you can consider they don't have any regulatory authorities, or it's a very minimal, almost non-existence. And second is that there is a regulatory authority. However, there are major issues regarding resources, which could be financial, and the right expertise to be able to carry out the reviews. It could be cultural issues, as well as, having the, not a quite right mindset in terms of the review process of the new applications. It also could be the issue of bureaucracy of the countries, as well as the lack of autonomy on the part of the national regulatory authorities. When they are part of a big Department of Health, they sometimes don't get as much resources in terms of the expertise and other resources that the regulatory authority would need. So one of the ways that has been recommended over the years, but until recently it hasn't been really implemented, and of course WHO has been quite instrumental in trying to roll out the whole concept of reliance in order to overcome some of the problems with the access to medicine, especially in these low and middle income countries. Now, some of the logos that you see on the slides, have put these, purposely, that, the efforts that is being pulled together as a collaboration by WHO, MARH in Africa, and also NEPAT, which is an organization focusing on regulatory strengthening of the African countries, which I will come back to that in a moment. So the reliance, basically what it means is relying on the marketing authorization that has been carried out by other competent agencies and accessing their regulatory review assessment in order to not to carry out the full review, but then carry out other regulatory pathway which are much, much quicker. And that is a bridge review or verification. A bridge review means that you do some assessment of the dossier, but largely is based on the assessment that is already being carried out by other competent authorities. I'll come back to that a little bit more to say, how you could actually get hold of those regulatory review assessment. The second other pathway, apart from the full review, is the verification. And the verification is basically just taking the regulatory review assessment that is done by a competent authority and applying that to the application that you have received in your agency. So in order to really crystallize the whole concept of the reliance, what it actually can provide in terms of the early access of the new medicine in low and middle income countries, I would like to share with you a case study of the South African authority that we have recently carried out implementing the concept of reliance. Now, currently, we have an authority in South Africa since 2018, which is called SAHPRA, and the full name is written there on the screen. Previously, there was an agency which is called MCC, Medicine Control Council. Now, one of the reasons that they decided to abolish that authority and create a new one, because of so many problems and difficulties that agency had. In particular, they had approximately a backlog of 16,000 applications. In the older MCC, it could take as long as 6-7 years even to get a variation through. So in the new regulatory agency, SAPRA, a few bodies such as Gates Foundation and a number of other organizations in Europe, for example, one in Germany, they came together and provided funding to the South African authority, SAPRA, to create what is referred to as the backlog project. Using that fund, they drafted number of experts from different European countries, and also some from outside Europe, to help the South African authority, to get rid of this backlog that they had. Now, the backlog was both in terms of the new chemical entities, NCEs, as well as the generic products. So the aim of the project basically was, I just articulated that to you, is to see how Reliance is able to get rid of the backlog that the agency had of 16,000, and how Reliance is capable of reducing that timeline for the assessment as such that the backlog project can be successful. So with that aim, the first thing that the authority had to do was to forge an understanding with major competent authorities in order to be able to get hold of the regulatory review assessment. But the key here to remember is that these review assessment by other regulatory authorities has to be unredacted. So in other words, nothing to be taken out, exactly the full regulatory review assessment from these authorities. Now, in order to be able to do that, you've got to develop this, the memorandum of understanding, MOU, with these agencies to be able to, and you may be, in this case in South Africa, for example, we wrote to 50 authorities, for example. These are only the handful that you see on the screen that, we were able to get the memorandum of understanding signed on time, that we could actually have the unredacted regulatory review assessment reports. So that was the first thing to do, which, we were quite successful. And, we then focused on both the NCEs as well as the generic products. So the key elements that we want to look at was the effectiveness of the implementation of the Reliance review based on the CMC, chemistry, manufacturing and control, the clinical assessment, GMP, and the manufacturing authorization, in other words, marketing authorization. So in terms of the results, this is self-explanatory. On the left-hand side, we've got the abridged for the CMC. On the right-hand side, we have got the abridged Reliance review on the clinical review. And you can see that the first part of the left side, it's, a no-brainer. The median of the 91 days for the abridged and 179 for the full review. And that was, statistically significant. Again, you don't really need to do any statistic to tell that would be significant. And then we also have the median of the applicant response, again, was much quicker in terms of the CMC. If you look at the entirety of the combination of both, we will see that 125 days for the abridged and 284 days for the full calendar review. Coming on the other side to the clinical review, the same story repeated. And the full, if you look at the bottom part, we have the 30% reduction in the review time in the clinical review, because obviously, it's a bit more complicated. You want to focus on the labeling that you want to prescribe, etc., etc. That's why it's just a little bit longer. And then we've got 56% reduction for the CMC. So in terms of the marketing authorization, the median time for 619 calendar days with the CMC and the median of 446 calendar days where both CMC and clinical underwent a breach, that translates into 28% reduction in the total review time. Now, I'm sure that, like me, you're also getting excited about that, listening to it, because this was really an amazing eye-opening in terms of demonstrating how Reliance, using the unredacted regulatory review assessment report from the competent authorities, could actually reduce the review time by this substantial amount. So looking at the generic, again, the same, but much stronger. In totality, we had about 55% reduction in the review time. So if you look at the CMC, NCEs versus generic, you see more or less there was a similarity between the time taken for the CMC in the new chemical entities as well as the generic products. And this box and whisker graph, illustrate that very clearly. That you can also see that the median point in both, is exactly, mirror image of the other. So in terms of the GMP assessment, this is an interesting area that has been really, really revolutionary because of the pandemic. So the majority of the CMCs now, when you do carry out a bridge review using the Reliance concept, it's done remotely using the regulatory review assessment report. And you can see in the old days, before carrying out the Reliance by the South African authority, SAHPRA, it used to take between 6 to 18 months. Now, this was performed in the backlog project in 2 to 3 hours. So you can see how I'm going to be coming to the conclusion of the early access of these vital medicine, sometimes life-saving medicines. And, that no longer we have to get into the situation that people in these countries are dying for drugs. That is the situation that we have had in the past. And this is what we are hoping to promote for the countries such as the 55 African countries to explore. So that brings me to the discussion points that I hope that we will have some conversation later on, and I'm sure that we will have enough time to do that. So you can see that without me telling you, it's very clear, crystal clear, to see that the bridge pathway using the Reliance concept has substantially reduced the review time, both with regard to the CMC as well as the clinical. An implementation of the Reliance in SAHPRA was a little bit probably less effective compare obviously to CMC because of all those other things that I mentioned, such as labeling, etc. The marketing authorization application received in the backlog project, only 20–30% qualified for the abridged review, where unredacted RRA assessment reports were obtained and submitted by the applicant. However, the Reliance still leads to resource saving, in terms of the review mechanism, and confirms the WHO's prediction that the way forward in early access of medicine in these low and middle income countries is the Reliance pathway.
Hey, Sam, it looks like you're muted.
Is it better now?
It is, thank you.
Thank you. So based on that, I would just like to make some recommendations. So now, I just want to focus a little bit on the first bullet point. One of the things that we experienced in South African Authority, and we now work in 24 different African countries, and I have got 3 PhD students who are working in the regulatory authorities in Africa. And my conversation with these agencies, as well as, of course, the experience with South African Authority, was that there is a substantial amount of cultural issues that are very making it very difficult to roll out the Reliance. And that's to do with the mindset. There's still quite a lot of assessors in these authorities are focused that the only review that's worth doing is the full review. And that is really the major hurdle, I would say. And this is something that we are trying to overcome by, for example, I'm a member of the 3 different technical committees, as that has been set up as part of the regulatory strengthening of the South African authorities. And I, try to go around the authorities. Last May, for example, I went to 5 authorities in Africa, trying to talk about the whole concept of the mindset. So there is a lot of activities happening. Gates Foundation have got consultants now. They go around and trying to do the same thing. In fact, one of the people who was involved in the backlog project of the South African authorities is now working for Gates, exactly trying to do the promotion of the Reliance. We should really base that our review on the risk-based review. Create a priority evaluation process and some of those things that Xavier talked about. Right. Oops, sorry. And these are, a couple of other recommendations that, I would like to have. The first reference agencies assessment report, the MOUs are quite important. Those should be done well in advance, trying to be able to have these unredacted regulatory review assessment reports ready and in hand. One of the key issues in Africa, and I'm sure that it's the same in other low and middle income countries that WHO is focusing on, is really a good information management system to be able to, for the applicants to be able to do the tracking, to be able to, get the right information at the right time, to be able to respond to the applicants' questions, the clock start issues. That is so important. In fact, as part of those technical committees that I mentioned earlier, one is to do with the information management system. So hoping that these things will get better in Africa in the coming years. Before I finish and hand over to Dominica, I would like to just focus a little bit on the economic impact of the Reliance. But before I do that, I also want to let you know that we have published the Reliance project, but the backlog project of the South African Authority, and it's been published in Frontiers Medicine, the regulatory science part of it. My email was on the front slide, and please, write to me if you would like me to send you a copy of that publication. We are preparing a second publication on the economic impact of the Reliance, And this is what I want to share with you. And this is really, hot off the press. And we, currently going through the costing and the economic aspect and the efficiency of the project, and hoping that would be of benefit to other countries who want to use the same approach. So the many NRAs are striving towards achieving the maturity level 3 in Africa. There are only 5 countries in Africa that have got maturity. This is WHO maturity level, that they use the global benchmarking tool to assess the authorities in the law and medical companies and give them the maturity level. So there are only 5 countries in Africa that have got maturity level 3. That is South Africa only for vaccines, Ghana, Tanzania, and Egypt. So these are the only handful of countries. The rest are either maturity level 1 or level 2. But those who are maturity level 3, of course, are striving to reach maturity level 4, which is the top level. For example, recently, Singapore agency received the maturity level 4. So as I said, this is done through the global benchmarking tool of WHO, and they look at all these elements in terms of the post-marketing surveillance, pharmacovigilance, et cetera, et cetera. In many instances, there is an imbalance between the treasury grants and the services on the NRA that needs to provide. In other words, not enough funds to be able to carry out everything that the WHO GBT requires them in order to move to the higher maturity level. And that's where they get stuck for many years. And that's another thing that we are working with many authorities in Africa now, trying to facilitate that improvement from one level to the other. So in the light of this FPR guideline for the marketing authorization application fees, recommend cost-based fees, meaning that you need to cost exactly what is going to cost you in terms of the manpower, in terms of the infrastructures, etc. And that's really the fee that you're going to be applying to the applicants for new application. But then this is in a bit to ensure that the financial burden of the regulatory review process is borne by the applicants, not the taxpayers' money. Also to ensure that the financial sustainability of the NRAs, as well as transparency in terms of how the fees are calculated, that is, the companies and the applicants are expected to pay. So the cost-based structures, is a good thing, but there are some already of the WHO listed authorities that charging higher fees for reliance, the same as they do for the accelerated assessment, the same as they do for fast track, for example. Now, their rationale is that if they are going to be getting the marketing authorization quicker for the companies, that translates into a lot of additional income and revenue, and therefore that it would not be unjustified to charge a higher fee. So so I had some questions for you, Kit. I don't know whether we could flash those out very quickly, all those questions that they could the audience could respond to.
Yeah, I'll give about 20-25 seconds per question.
Yes, please.
Do you want me to show the results after each question?
No, I think in the interest of time, probably not.
Okay. All right, moving on to the second question. Then the third poll question. And here is the last one. All right, that's all of them.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And over to you, Domenico.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a very interesting review of a real-life project that, in my opinion, has a significant impact, especially for the population that can get new drugs in a shorter period of time. For the time being, there are no questions, but I wonder, maybe I can ask you to Sam and another one to Xavier. To Sam, I would like to ask, the experience of South Africa, it's really very positive. I wonder if you are knowledgeable about other African countries that want to follow the South African experience, or in an ideal world, is there any plan to create a kind of African regulatory agency supporting countries that do not have the resources to establish their own regulatory agency? We know that some African countries are very small and they have important priorities rather than investing money in regulators. So can you elaborate a little bit on these 2 points, Sam?
Indeed, thank you very much, Domenico. That's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked that question, because it's something perhaps it would have been useful for me to mention. In Africa, there are 5 regions, and over the last, starting from 9-10 years ago, over the years, there has been regional agencies developed. And the purpose, and this has been by the African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization, AMRH. The purpose has been in order to harmonize the regulatory assessment, as well as capacity building. So those who are stronger within a region, say, for example, in Southern Africa, Tanzania, and SAPRA, Regulatory Authority in South Africa, are stronger agencies, and those will be able to do capacity building, as part of the regional activity. The only problem with the regional activity is that they don't have jurisdiction power. In other words, they can only recommend to the national authorities for the marketing authorization. Now, what is happening now, together with the collaboration of the WHO Coalition of Interested Parties Network, there's a huge momentum because of the ratifications of the African Medicine Agency to improve the regulatory strength of all the 55 countries in Africa. And through these technical committees that have been developed, there are 10 technical committees in different areas of regulatory assessment. So yes, there is, the short answer to your question is yes, there are several activities and initiatives in Africa in order to be able to strengthen the regulatory capacity of the smallest as well as the largest countries in Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question for Xavier. Xavier, you said correctly that the compassionate use is regulated at the national level. But I wonder if the European agency is taking records, at least of the safety of this patient. Because, as we know, when numbers are very low, you should create a network to reach a good number to make a benefit risk analysis. And I think the European agency could play a role in collecting safety information, for instance, from single cases in Italy or in France or in Germany, in order to make a better assessment. Have you any comment on this issue?
Yeah, that's an important point, Domenico, because some companies use the compassionate use, as you mentioned, to support a future marketing authorization. And as far as I know, the agency is not proactively collecting data, because also the data is not available to all the parties. But there is one way the PRAC, the Pharmacovigilance Committee, in fact, is not in charge only of all these centralized procedure products in Europe, but all the products in Europe. Therefore, the PRAC has a number of ways through the member states to collect all safety information on the products on the market. This is not that the EMEA itself is collecting that from a proactive point of view, but through the PRAC, they are receiving the consolidated data from the member states, triggering signals in some cases, or triggering alarms in others. But particularly, I can tell you that the way where the EMEA is noticed on the safety of compassionate use is when the time of the marketing authorization comes. So because at that time, the company must submit all the data from the compassionate use from the national level. So that's the current approach to that.
Okay, thank you very much. It was an interesting clarification. So it's a good to hear that not a single patient data is lost. Every patient, every data is contributing to the overall benefit risk analysis of any new drug.
Yeah.
Now we are at the end of this webinar. I thank you again, Xavier and Sam, for their very interesting and engaging presentations. And of course, I would like to thank all the participants. Please note that we have already planned the next one, which will be in May, and we'll be dealing with the patient's role in drug development. We know that is a topic of extreme interest. Many companies are creating network with patient association, expert patient, and so on. So we will elaborate on this issue, and we hope to give you some useful suggestions. Thank you again, and let's meet again in the near future. Bye-bye,
Thank
Sam.
you very much
Bye-bye,
indeed. Thank you, Domenico.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.